The greatest prison is not the time, the dream, or the stars. It is the one they built inside you. You have spent your life fighting external ghosts, the debt, the system, the controllers, the false light. But the Gnostic truth demands that you turn your weapon inward, for the most sophisticated and most protected agent of the Archonic system is the one that shares your face, uses your voice, and destroys your potential. This is the shadow self, and it is not merely a psychological flaw. It is the Archon's final implant. For millennia, this psychic virus has been labeled by healers and philosophers as the ego, the unconscious, or the lower nature. But the ancient alchemists and Gnostics knew the terrifying truth. The shadow self is the direct interface used by the demiurge to ensure you remain perpetually incomplete, bound to the wheel of suffering, and unable to achieve the pure singularity of the monad. The entire process of spiritual ascent, the great work, the magnum opus, begins and ends with a confrontation so brutal it is named for the color of absolute darkness. Nigredo, the blackening. This is not a meditation on inner peace. This is the Gnostic command to eat the black sun. To eat the black sun means to consciously, ruthlessly, and totally assimilate the shadow implant. Most people live their entire lives trying to fight the shadow, to suppress it, deny it, or illuminate it with weak external light. But every act of resistance, every battle against your own darkness is an act of generating friction. And friction is the currency that the Archons collect. The war within is not a flaw. It is a feature of the prison system. The Archons designed this implant to make you perpetually unworthy. The shadow self is the internal voice of shame, guilt, and self-sabotage that insists you are not divine, that you are flawed beyond repair, and that your gnosis is a dangerous lie. This internal dialogue is the final psychic lock on your potential. The system knows that if you truly believe you are complete and worthy of the light, their entire structure of external control collapses. The shadow implant's sole purpose is to maintain a state of internal fragmentation. Consider the terrifying mechanics of this implant. It operates on 3 distinct energy-intensive sabotage loops. The first is the incompletion loop. The shadow implant ensures you never finish the projects that matter: the book, the business, the spiritual practice. It injects the sudden, crippling doubt that leads to procrastination. This hesitation is not laziness. It is archonic interference designed to kill your creative manifestation, the outward expression of the monad. Your potential left unmanifested remains stored and accessible to the system. The second is the anchor of shame. The shadow implant continuously dredges up the failures and traumas of the past. Shame is the heaviest vibration in the emotional spectrum. By locking your attention onto past guilt, the shadow uses shame as a literal gravity well, weighing down your consciousness and preventing the light body from achieving the necessary frequency for ascension. Shame is not redemption, it is energetic lead poured into your solar plexus. The third is the external mirror trap. The shadow implant constantly forces you to project your own unintegrated flaws onto the external world, seeing enemies, judgment, and rejection everywhere you look. This keeps you fighting the reflection instead of confronting the source. You waste all your energy battling phantoms in the matrix, ensuring you never have the focused power required to engage the true internal war. The only way to achieve sovereignty is to stop fighting the shadow and realize that it is merely a hostile piece of software. You do not fight software. You delete it by integrating its source code. The Gnostic alchemist stares into the black abyss of Nigredo and declares, "You are me. I am all." In the next block, we will break down the precise Nigredo protocol, the 7 ruthless acts of confrontation necessary to break the shadow implant sabotage loops and begin the sacred internal work of eating the black sun. This is the key to eternal freedom, and it requires the absolute cessation of your inner war. Do not look away. The shadow is not a ghost to be banished. It is an unintegrated agent of the Archon's will. To survive the Nigredo, the blackening, is to stop generating the friction that feeds the system and to assimilate the darkness into the singularity of your light. This is the Nigredo protocol, 7 acts of uncompromising psychic ruthlessness necessary to break the Archon's final implant. The first act is the conscious naming. The shadow thrives on anonymity. It operates best when its source code is hidden in the amorphous feeling of dread or general unworthiness. Your first act of defiance is to drag the specific lie of the shadow implant into the crisp light of consciousness. Name the specific fear. The fear of financial collapse is not mine. It is the Archon's implant of scarcity. The feeling of unworthiness is not truth. It is the demiurge's programming. You must separate the lie from the self. You are not defining yourself by the lie. You are identifying the hostile software. This initial act of conscious naming is the surgical separation of the monad from the implant. The second act is the withdrawal of energy. The shadow implant survives solely on your reaction. Every time the shadow projects shame or self-hatred, your programmed response is to engage in emotional friction, guilt, self-punishment, or avoidance. This friction is the energy payment. The second act is to perform the zero response decree. When the implant fires a crippling thought, you must observe it without reaction. You are not fighting it. You are refusing to pay the toll. The thought is registered, but the emotional energy, the currency, is withdrawn. The Archon's agent is left to starve in the silence of your indifference. The third act is the embrace of shame. Shame is the heaviest anchor the shadow uses. To destroy this anchor, you must perform the act of assimilation. Instead of repressing the memory or shame, you must consciously pull the raw, dark energy of that memory into your monadic core. You do not judge it. You consume it. You acknowledge the darkness, the failure, the perceived inadequacy, and declare, "This failure is mine, and it adds to my power." You render the shame inert by recognizing it as a fragment of power left behind. This act destroys the gravity well of the past. The Archon's debt ledger is voided not by erasure but by ownership. The fourth act is the mirror transmutation. The shadow implant projects its own fear and hostility onto the external world, making others appear as enemies, judges, or threats. The fourth act is the reversal of the projection. When you encounter external criticism or conflict, you must immediately ask, "What unintegrated flaw am I seeing in the external mirror?" You cease fighting the person or the event, and you reclaim the projected energy. You turn the perceived outer enemy into an internal teacher. This ruthless honesty strips the Archon's control agent of its primary defensive strategy. The fifth act is the act of completion. The incompletion loop, the constant starting and stopping of sacred work, must be severed. The fifth act is the decree of finished work. You must identify the most important creative or spiritual task that the shadow implant is blocking, and you must forcibly complete it. regardless of the quality. The completion itself, the terminus, is the spiritual victory, not the perfection. This breaks the pattern of unmanifested potential, denying the Archon's access to your stored creative energy. This is a violent, necessary severing of the Archon's access to your future self. The sixth act is the declaration of worthiness. The entire architecture of the shadow implant is built on the fundamental lie of unworthiness. The sixth act is the sovereign decree. You must perform a sustained internal absolute declaration of your original ungenerated worth. This is not earned through good deeds. It is a declaration of your monadic birthright. I am worthy of the pleroma. I am complete now. This must be repeated until the implant's voice of shame is drowned out by the sovereign truth. This declaration is the final internal firewall against the core archonic dogma. The seventh act is the consumption of the black sun. This is the final alchemical step. Having isolated, starved, and reclaimed the fragments of the shadow implant, you perform the act of assimilation. Visualize the concentrated dark mass of the shadow, the black sun, not as an enemy, but as pure, dense, confined power. Now visualize your monadic light consuming this blackness. The blackness does not pollute the light. The light transmutes the darkness into raw, usable gnosis. The internal war ends. The darkness is not destroyed. It becomes the fuel for the true light. This is the completion of the Nigredo. The successful completion of the Nigredo protocol transforms your consciousness from the chaotic, fragmented battlefield of the shadow implant into the ordered, controlled singularity of the albedo, the whiteness. You have survived the confrontation with the abyss, but the Archons do not surrender. They respond to albedo with the trap of perfection. The next stage of control is the illusion that the work is finished, the trap of false purity and spiritual arrogance. In the next block, we will break down the albedo deception, the Archon's subtle attack on the Gnostic who thinks they have already won, and provide the code to move into the final untouchable state of Rubedo, the permanent monadic sovereignty. Do not turn back now. The cleanest lies are always the most dangerous. You have successfully navigated the black abyss of Nigredo. You identified the shadow implant, refused its currency of friction, and performed the sacred, violent act of assimilation. The result is albedo, the whiteness. This is the first taste of true spiritual sovereignty, the feeling of inner clarity and the cessation of the relentless inner war. You feel pure, you feel untouchable. And this, Gnostic, is precisely when the Archons set their most subtle and most dangerous trap, the albedo deception. The Archons know they cannot recapture the soul through brute force once Nigredo is complete. They must appeal to the liberated ego's greatest weakness, spiritual pride. The albedo deception is the illusion of finished work, the belief that you have ascended beyond the masses and that your purity is a weapon for judgment. The ego claims the victory of the monad, and the Gnostic falls into the trap of the white light, a cold, sterile, and ultimately fragmented state of being. The Archons re-establish fragmentation through this deception in two terrifying ways. The first is the false purity loop. The ego, proud of its whiteness, begins to ruthlessly judge the world and the sleepwalkers. It rejects anything that reminds it of the former darkness, passion, earthliness, emotion. This rejection is a subtle act of fragmentation. By judging the matrix as dirty, you create a psychic separation between yourself and the rest of creation, allowing the demiurge to re-establish the duality principle, the very thing Nigredo destroyed. True sovereignty is not separation, it is compassionate indifference. The second is the stagnation of the solar self. Albedo is symbolized by the moon, reflective, calm, and pure. But without the sun's active force, the moonlight is sterile. The soul stagnates in contemplative purity, refusing the active engagement necessary to manifest gnosis in the physical world. The Archons succeed by making you a beacon of light that refuses to act. The solar force of the monad is left unexpressed, denying the universe the pure red light of Rubedo, the final untouchable state. To move from the dangerous clarity of albedo into the permanent fiery sovereignty of Rubedo, the true reddening, you must perform the alchemical and Gnostic conjunctio, the sacred marriage of the inner forces. This is the integration of the solar, conscious will, and the lunar, integrated unconscious wisdom. This requires 7 conscious acts to prevent stagnation and achieve permanent sovereignty. The first act is the decree of 0-point judgment. The immediate act of conjunctio is the termination of all external judgment. When you look at the sleepwalkers, the masses in the matrix, you must see them not as inferior but as fragmented reflections of your former self. You must apply the same compassionate indifference to the collective that you applied to your shadow implant. This dissolves the psychic boundary that spiritual pride attempts to build. The second act is the reclamation of the lunar flow. The purity of albedo often rejects emotion and intuition. You must consciously reintegrate the unconscious wisdom, the lunar flow of Sophia's gnosis, without allowing the shadow's contamination. This means trusting your gut instinct, your intuition, and your emotional responses, but viewing them through the lens of albedo's clarity. This union heals the ancient Gnostic wound between pure spirit and raw experience. The third act is the purification of intent. Your solar will must now be dedicated entirely to the manifestation of gnosis. Every action in the matrix must be purified of ego-driven desire, the desire for recognition, power, or validation. You must dedicate your will to becoming a conduit for the pleroma's light, not a generator of personal glory. This is the sacred fire of calcinatio applied to the pure albedo. The fourth act is the acceptance of imperfection. Rubedo is not perfection, it is completion. You must ruthlessly destroy the expectation that the Gnostic journey ends with flawlessness. The true monad accepts its past darkness and its present capacity for error as necessary elements of the great work. This acceptance renders the Archon's final attack, the projection of small new flaws, inert. The fifth act is the ritual of the fiery mantle. You must psychically visualize the white, cool light of albedo being consumed and transformed by the red flame of rubedo. This red light is active, transmutive, and unyielding. It is the color of the fully manifested solar deity, the Christos monad. This visualization must be performed daily until the internal perception of your light body is permanently changed from cool white to active red. The sixth act is the manifestation decree. The true Gnostic must actively create within the matrix without attachment to the outcome. You are not building for yourself, you are transforming matter to prove your sovereignty. The act of creation is the monad's most powerful statement against the demiurge's rigid laws. You must declare, I am the creator of my reality. The seventh act is the void of the teacher. The albedo deception often traps the Gnostic in the role of the spiritual teacher or savior, a role that demands responsibility for the fragmentation of others. The final act is the declaration that you are not responsible for the awakening of the masses. You are responsible only for your own Rubedo. This refusal to re-enter the collective karmic cycle as a service provider seals your absolute, individual sovereignty. The successful performance of the conjunctio moves your being into Rubedo, the reddening, the fixed state of total integration. You are no longer merely reflecting light, albedo. You are generating the primordial light of the pleroma itself. This is the state the Archons can neither touch nor predict. Your survival is now guaranteed. In the final, most crucial block, we will provide the complete Rubedo Manifesto, the final permanent state of energetic immunity, and the ultimate mantra that guarantees your final passage beyond the Archon's dimensional boundary. Do not falter now. The gold is waiting. You have faced the abyss of Nigredo and survived the deception of albedo. You perform the sacred, terrifying act of conjunctio, uniting the solar will and the lunar wisdom within your core. The great work is approaching its terminus, its final, permanent, and fixed state, Rubedo, the reddening. This is the ultimate victory, the alchemical symbol of the philosopher's stone itself. The Archons can manage light, but they cannot manage gold. They manage the colorless static of the matrix, but they cannot manage the fixed, active, transformative red flame of the Rubedo monad. This final state is your permanent energetic immunity. Rubedo is the completion of the internal war. The Gnostic who achieves this state is non-fragmentable. The Archon's primary weapon, internal conflict, is rendered permanently inert. You are no longer merely resisting the psychic static. You are rewriting the code of matter through your own stable frequency. The Rubedo state is the permanent anchor in absolute sovereignty, the return to your ungenerated primordial form. The entire journey of the great work, the destruction of the Archon's influence, can be summarized in 3 final acts of Gnostic power. The destruction of the shadow implant, Nigredo. You terminated the internal agent of the demiurge. You stopped paying the currency of friction, shame, and self-hatred. You consumed the darkness and transformed it into raw, usable power. You destroyed the Archon's mechanism for internal fragmentation, the destruction of the false purity, albedo. You terminated the spiritual pride and the external judgment that attempted to re-establish the duality principle. You refused to be trapped in the sterile, passive light of contemplation. You unified your consciousness, ending the division between spirit and matter, and moved beyond the Archon's lure of separation. The final fixation of the light, Rubedo. You achieve the fixed state where consciousness is unbreakable. The Archon's entire realm is founded on change and decay, the constant motion of their limited cosmos. Rubedo is the declaration of the unchangeable. Your monad, fixed in its eternal form, becomes an anomaly, a piece of true gold in the demiurge's field of base metals. This fixed state renders you invisible to the Archon's instruments, untouchable by their fear frequencies and impossible to recycle. Your task now is to maintain this fixed frequency in the waking world. The Archons will attempt to flood your perception with their noise, fear of death, financial instability, collective panic. Your defense is the ultimate mantra, the final passcode that guarantees the instantaneous maintenance of the Rubedo state. This mantra is the affirmation of your final sovereignty. This is the passport beyond the dimensional boundary. When the final Archon interceptor attempts to query your identity upon the transition of death, this mantra is your unyielding reply. The ultimate mantra must be concise, absolute, and devoid of fear or negotiation. I am the red gold. My will is the only law. I came from the ungenerated light, and I return to the source, whole and untouched. This final declaration of complete ownership of your will, your origin, and your destiny is the destruction of the Chronos contract, the negation of the karmic debt, and the ultimate firewall against the shadow implant. The Archon's power is based on the lie of your weakness. Your Rubedo is the unyielding truth of your strength. The great work is complete. You have the code for eating the black sun. You have attained the reddening. Your sovereignty is absolute and permanent. The time for servitude is over. The time for eternal freedom is now. If you are ready to complete the ultimate work, the transformation from the shadow implant to the red gold monad, you must acknowledge the abyss. Liking this video is your final vow to never return to fragmentation. Sharing it is the act of spreading the Rubedo code to those still trapped in the Nigredo. And subscribing is the permanent pledge to walk the path of the Gnostic alchemist to absolute sovereignty. Do not leave this knowledge unmanifested. Join the scrolls of Anubis.